The day I realized my silence had real weight was the day they tried to delete me from a company that couldn't function without me. I wasn't on any org chart, didn't have a Slack profile, and you wouldn't find my name on the team roster from last year's holiday party. But the code running through the veins of Kavara Financial Solutions, the compliance engine that kept our banking partners happy and our credit lines open, that was all me. 29 months I'd been there, officially listed as a back-end compliance consultant through some shell vendor agreement buried 3 subsidiaries deep. Unofficially, I was the guy who built the entire foundation their IPO dreams were sitting on. Name's Carter Wells. And I learned the hard way that being invisible in corporate America isn't always a bad thing. Look, I didn't start out wanting to be a ghost. Got laid off from Denver First National during budget cuts. Standard story. That's when I figured out something important about corporate life. The safest place to be is somewhere they can't see you coming or going. So when Larry Hoffman at Kavara offered me contract work 3 years later, I made him a deal. Keep me off the books, out of the meetings, away from the politics. Just give me the technical problems and let me solve them. He got it right away. Larry's one of those rare CFOs who actually knows what a database is. Used to write code himself back in the 80s before he moved into the money side of things. We had a good system. Every couple weeks, Larry and I would grab coffee at this little place down the street from their Denver office. He'd tell me what the banking regulators were asking for. I'd tell him how to build it. No PowerPoint presentations, no status meetings, no explaining why I needed 3 weeks to do something right instead of 3 days to do it wrong. The compliance engine I built for them was like a smoke detector for financial data. Community banks would connect their systems to Kavara's platform, and my code would watch everything in real time. Transaction patterns, lending ratios, regulatory thresholds, it monitored all of it and sent up flares the second anything looked off. The banks loved it because it meant they could catch problems before the regulators did. Kavara loved it because banks were paying them serious money for that peace of mind. Here's why this mattered more than most people realized. When banks mess up compliance these days, the FDIC doesn't just send a warning letter. They start with penalties around $250,000 per violation, and that's just the beginning. Remember what happened to DataCorp last year? One compliance failure during an audit, and their banking licenses got suspended. Company went under in 6 months. Here's the thing though, I didn't just build the system, I built it smart. Every major component had my digital signature baked in like a security thread woven into currency, invisible until you know where to look. If someone tried to modify core functions without proper authorization, the system would know. It would lock down, demand re-authentication, and send alerts up the chain. Not malicious, just careful. I'd seen too many systems get destroyed by people who didn't understand what they were touching. Larry understood this. He'd been around long enough to know that the most dangerous person in any company is the one who thinks they know how everything works but actually doesn't. So he kept me in my little bubble, working from my apartment with my rescue dog Scout sleeping under the desk, drinking coffee from the same thermal mug I'd been using since my banking days. I liked it that way. While everyone else was fighting over headcount and trying to get FaceTime with the executives, I was building something that actually mattered. The system passed 2 external audits in 2023 alone, which kept Kavara's $22 million credit line flowing smooth as silk. Banking partners trusted us because the code was solid. The code was solid because I built it without anyone looking over my shoulder telling me to cut corners. Then Larry got sick. No warning, just a text from his assistant saying he'd be out on medical leave for a few weeks. Hard episode, she said. Nothing life-threatening, but the doctor wanted him to take it easy. That was it. One day I was reporting to the only person in the company who understood what I actually did. The next day I was dangling in the wind with nobody to call if something went wrong. Enter Trevor Nash, VP of Operations. Now, Trevor wasn't a bad guy exactly, just the kind of MBA who thinks efficiency means cutting everything that doesn't show up in a spreadsheet. With the IPO coming up and the board breathing down his neck about cost reduction, he was looking for quick wins wherever he could find them. He'd been waiting for an opportunity like this for months. First thing he did was announce something called an efficiency review. Everyone in the company had to submit detailed reports about their role, their deliverables, their value proposition. Weekly status updates, project roadmaps, the whole 9 yards. I watched from my apartment as good engineers started having nervous breakdowns trying to quantify why their work mattered. But here's the thing. I wasn't in Trevor's system. My contract wasn't filed under HR. My work didn't show up in his project management tools. As far as his spreadsheets were concerned, I didn't exist. At first, I thought that would protect me. I was wrong. The first warning shot came on a Wednesday afternoon. One line in my email: no greeting, no signature. Your access will be reviewed soon. Please be prepared to justify your continued involvement. I stared at that message for maybe 30 seconds, then closed my laptop and took Scout for a walk. I'd seen this movie before. Review meant removal, justify meant beg. And I don't beg. I've been laid off enough times to know the smell of the axe before it falls. But I also knew something Trevor didn't. You can't fire the guy holding the structural blueprints and expect the building to keep standing. I didn't panic when I got that email. Not at first. I've learned that the best way to handle corporate threats is the same way you handle a dog that's growling at you. Don't make sudden movements, don't show fear, and definitely don't run. Instead, I did what I always do when things get uncertain. I documented everything. 3 days after that first warning shot, Trevor sent another message. This one had more meat on it. Need to clarify the scope of your involvement with Kavara Systems. Please join me for a brief sync tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Bring documentation of your deliverables and current project status. Bring documentation. The man really said that like I was some intern begging for college credit. I didn't reply to the email. Instead, I spent the evening organizing my files. Not for Trevor, for me. I pulled together every contract amendment, every technical specification, every email where Larry had signed off on system changes. You learn to keep good records when you've been through enough corporate reorganizations. The next morning, I drove to Kavara's office building for the first time in about 6 months. Usually, all my meetings with Larry happened at the coffee shop, but Trevor wanted me to come to his domain. Fair enough, his office was one of those glass boxes they give middle managers to make them feel important while still letting everyone watch what they're doing. Trevor was already inside when I arrived, typing with 2 fingers like he was playing whack-a-mole on his keyboard. The second he saw me through the glass, he smiled. Not friendly, triumphant. Like he'd already won something I didn't know we were competing for. "Carter, come in," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. No handshake, no small talk. Just a guy in a shirt that was too tight across the shoulders, sitting behind a manila folder like it contained state secrets. I sat down and waited. In my experience, people like Trevor always want to do the talking. Give them enough rope and they'll usually hang themselves with it. "I'll keep this brief," he began, hands folded over that folder. "We've done a comprehensive review of your contract situation. It seems your role here isn't properly defined in our systems. No formal HR file, no clear reporting structure, just a lot of vendor payments and back-end commits that nobody can really explain." He paused like he expected me to defend myself. When I didn't, he kept going. "Now, I'm not saying you haven't contributed. The work you've done has clearly had value. But we're moving toward an IPO timeline, and the board is asking hard questions about operational inefficiencies in our tech stack. Right now, there's too much ambiguity around your work, and frankly, that makes me nervous from a risk perspective." I nodded like I was following along. I could see where this was heading, but I was curious how he'd package it. "What are you proposing?" "I've been looking at our infrastructure costs, and frankly, some of these back-end modules seem redundant. How hard would it be to migrate your, compliance algorithms to our internal DevOps pipeline?" There it was. The man had just asked me to move a compliance engine into a development pipeline like it was a WordPress plugin. I kept my expression neutral. "What are you proposing?" Trevor opened the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Effective immediately. Your contractor agreement is terminated. You'll need to transfer all system knowledge to our internal team and remove any proprietary code or documentation from your local environment." He slid the paper across the desk. It was already printed, already signed. "To whom it may concern, effective immediately, the services of Wells Technical Consulting and associated personnel are no longer required. All proprietary work conducted under this agreement is considered intellectual property of Kavara Financial Solutions. All local data and systems access must be permanently removed. Trevor Nash, Vice President Operations." I read it once, folded it neatly, and slipped it into my jacket pocket. "Understood." Trevor blinked. I could tell he'd been expecting pushback, maybe some negotiation. "You'll receive final payment through your usual vendor channels. And of course, we'll need you to delete everything from your local systems. Company policy." I watched him for a moment. Here was a guy who'd just ordered me to erase the foundation of their compliance infrastructure, and he had no idea what he'd done. It was like watching someone pull the fire alarm because they didn't like the sound of the smoke detector. "When do you need that done?" "Today would be ideal. We want to move quickly on this transition." I stood up and shook his hand. "I'll take care of it this afternoon." Walking out of that building, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Not anger, not disappointment, clarity. Trevor had just handed me a signed confession that he'd ordered me to delete active company infrastructure without understanding what it was or how it worked. The man had basically written his own termination letter and asked me to deliver it. By the time I got home, I had a plan. Scout was waiting by the door, tail wagging like I'd been gone for weeks instead of an hour. I scratched behind his ears and fired up my laptop. Trevor wanted me to delete everything? Fine, I'd give him exactly what he asked for. I opened my local development environment and started going through the files. Thousands of lines of code, documentation, system diagrams, test cases, everything I'd built over the past 2.5 years. Each file I deleted was like removing a gear from a watch. Trevor would find out soon enough what happens when you take apart something you don't understand. All of it went. Local repositories, backup files, development tools, documentation archives. Gone. I even cleared my browser cache and deleted the shortcuts on my desktop. By the time I was done, my laptop looked like it had never heard of Kavara Financial Solutions. But here's what Trevor didn't understand and what I didn't bother explaining during our little meeting. My laptop wasn't the system, it was just a window into the system. The real architecture lived on Kavara's servers, embedded with credential validation protocols I'd designed specifically for moments like this. Every major function included identity verification tied to my contractor credentials. Remove those credentials improperly, and the system would know something was wrong. Think of it like a car's anti-theft system. You can hotwire the ignition, but if you don't have the right key fob, the engine's going to shut down after about 30 seconds. Except instead of a car alarm, my system was designed to trigger compliance alerts that would ripple all the way up to our banking partners. Trevor thought he was firing a contractor. What he'd actually done was pull the keystone out of an arch while standing underneath it. I closed my laptop and made myself a sandwich. Scout curled up on his favorite cushion, and I turned on the afternoon news. Somewhere across town, the compliance engine was running its normal cycles, checking transaction patterns and regulatory thresholds like it had every day for the past 2 years. But now it was doing something else too. It was waiting for my next scheduled check-in, the weekly verification that confirmed everything was still working the way it should. That check-in was supposed to happen at midnight, and when it failed, every banking partner we had would know about it by morning. At 12:03 a.m., the first alert fired. I wasn't awake to see it happen, but I knew it would. The compliance engine tried to run its weekly verification cycle, looking for my credential signature to confirm system integrity. When it couldn't find the authentication token, because Trevor had ordered me to delete everything, the system did exactly what I designed it to do. It threw up a red flag. The first notification went to Kavara's internal security dashboard at 12:03:17 a.m., according to the logs I'd see later. Nothing dramatic, just a routine entry. Weekly verification cycle incomplete. Credential authentication failed. Most people would have ignored it. After all, system logs generate hundreds of entries every day. But this particular alert had a special classification buried in its metadata, one that marked it as FFIEC compliance critical. By 12:15 a.m., that alert had triggered an automated escalation to Mountain Vista Community Bank, one of Kavara's biggest partners. Their risk management system was configured to monitor any irregularities in Kavara's compliance infrastructure 24/7. Banks don't sleep when it comes to regulatory oversight. When they saw an authentication failure on a system that was supposed to be bulletproof, their own automated protocols kicked in immediately. The weekend timing made everything worse. No IT staff to investigate, no executives to make judgment calls, just automated systems following their programming. By 1:30 a.m. Saturday morning, 2 more banking partners had received similar alerts. By 3 a.m., their risk management systems had all reached the same conclusion: potential compliance violation requiring immediate containment. I woke up around 6:30 like I always do and took Scout out for his morning walk. Beautiful Colorado morning, clear sky, mountains visible in the distance. Just me, my dog, and the knowledge that somewhere across town, people were probably starting to discover that their weekend had just gotten very complicated. The first call came while I was making coffee. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice as soon as I picked up. It was Sarah Chen from Mountain Vista's compliance department. Carter, sorry to call so early on a Saturday, but we're seeing some serious irregularities in the Kavara compliance feed. Our system shows an authentication failure that triggered our risk protocols overnight. Everything okay? I took a sip of coffee and looked out the window. Far as I know, what kind of failure are you seeing? Weekly verification cycle didn't complete. Our automated risk management flagged it as a potential compliance violation. We've got a mandatory hold on all new transaction approvals until we can verify system integrity. That includes your $22 million credit facility. There it was, the first domino. How long does that hold usually last? Depends on how quickly Kavara can provide verified documentation that their compliance system is functioning within FDIC parameters. Usually takes a few hours if it's just a technical glitch. Could take weeks if there's an actual regulatory violation. We're talking potential federal review here, Carter. I thanked her for the heads up and hung up. Then I sat back in my kitchen chair and waited. Scout was lying in his favorite patch of morning sunlight, completely oblivious to the fact that his owner had just triggered the corporate equivalent of a fire alarm. The second call came around 9 a.m. This time it was Kavara's legal department. A woman named Angela Rodriguez, someone I'd never talked to but who apparently knew exactly who I was. Mr. Wells, we need to discuss your contractor status immediately. We're showing multiple system anomalies that appear to be related to your access credentials. We've had 3 banking partners contact us this morning about compliance irregularities. Can you come in today? I'm no longer under contract with Kavara as of yesterday. You'll need to talk to Trevor Nash about that. Long pause. The kind of silence that happens when someone realizes they're standing in quicksand. Mr. Nash ordered your termination? That's correct. I have his written directive if you need to see it. Another pause, longer this time. I could hear papers rustling, keyboard clicking. Mr. Wells, are you aware that your credential deletion has triggered mandatory risk reviews at multiple FDIC-regulated institutions? I deleted my local files as instructed. Nothing more, nothing less. We'll be in touch. By 10 a.m., I was getting calls from people I'd worked with over the years. Engineers, project managers, even a couple of executives who'd probably never said my name before yesterday. All asking the same basic question. What the hell was happening with the compliance system? The pattern was always the same. Apologetic tone, casual question, growing panic as they realized the scope of the problem. 3 more banking partners had called Kavara's main line. The automated alerts were cascading exactly the way I'd designed them to. Trevor probably didn't realize what was happening until around 10:30. That's when the legal department would have dragged him into a conference room and started asking questions he couldn't answer. Questions like, did you verify system dependencies before terminating this contractor? And do you have documentation showing proper handoff of critical infrastructure? And are you aware that this decision has triggered regulatory reviews at 6 FDIC-insured institutions? The answers, of course, were no, and definitely not. I was cleaning up the breakfast dishes when my phone rang again. This time it was Larry. His voice sounded tired but alert, like someone who'd been woken up by a very unwelcome phone call. Carter, what the hell is going on over there? I've got Angela Rodriguez calling me at home on a Saturday morning, saying the compliance dashboard looks like a Christmas tree and half our banking partners are threatening to pull out of their agreements. Trevor terminated my contract yesterday, ordered me to delete all local data and transfer system ownership to internal teams. Silence on the other end of the line. The kind of silence that happens when an experienced executive realizes someone just drove the company car off a cliff. He what? I've got his termination memo if you want to see it. Pretty clear instructions about removing all proprietary data from my systems. Did you explain to him how the validation systems work? I tried. He wasn't interested in technical details. Something about migrating compliance algorithms to the DevOps pipeline. More silence. I could almost hear Larry's blood pressure rising. Carter, I need you to not do anything until I can get back to the office. Can you give me 2 hours? I'm not under contract anymore, Larry. Trevor made that pretty clear. Just don't do anything. Please. I hung up and looked at Scout, who was watching me with the kind of expression dogs get when they know something important is happening but can't figure out what. I scratched behind his ears and checked my email. 23 new messages since morning. Most of them were automated system notifications. The compliance engine was trying to run its regular cycles and failing authentication at every step. A few were from people at Kavara I'd worked with over the years, asking if I knew why their monitoring dashboards were showing errors. But the interesting one came from Mountain Vista's risk management team. Subject line, credit facility suspension, immediate response required. I opened it and read it twice. Then I forwarded it to Larry's personal email without comment. The message was pretty straightforward. Due to authentication irregularities indicating potential regulatory violations in Kavara's compliance infrastructure, Mountain Vista was placing an immediate suspension on Kavara's $22 million revolving credit facility, pending resolution of system integrity concerns. All outstanding credit approvals were frozen until Kavara could provide verified documentation that their compliance monitoring was functioning within FDIC parameters. Similar messages from 4 other banking partners arrived within the next hour. Same language, same outcome. Kavara's financial lifeline had just been cut. I closed my laptop and decided to take Scout to the park. We had a good long walk, threw a tennis ball around for a while, said hello to some of the other regulars. Just a normal Saturday morning in Denver, except that across town, a VP who thought he understood systems was probably getting the education of his lifetime. Larry called me back around noon. This time his voice had a different quality to it. The kind of controlled calm you hear from people who've just walked into a burning building and are trying to figure out how to put out the fire. Carter, I need you to walk me through exactly what happened yesterday. I told him the whole story. Trevor's email, the meeting, the termination memo, the instruction to delete everything. Larry listened without interrupting, which told me he was taking notes. Did you explain the authentication protocols to him? I tried. He wasn't interested in technical details. Said he needed clear ownership and accountability. And you deleted your local environment? Everything. Just like he ordered. Long pause. Carter, we've got 5 banking partners asking questions about system integrity. Mountain Vista has frozen our credit line. Legal is pulling every contract you've ever signed with us. The board is asking why our compliance system is failing, and I'm sitting here trying to explain that we accidentally fired the guy who built it. I waited. There was more coming. Trevor's in full damage control mode. He's telling everyone this is a minor technical glitch that'll be resolved by end of business today. He's got our internal dev team trying to figure out the authentication protocols. How's that going for them? About as well as you'd expect. They can see the error messages, but they can't figure out how to reset the credential chain without your signature keys. I wasn't surprised. The validation system wasn't just a password you could reset. It was built into the architecture itself, woven through multiple layers of the compliance engine like structural supports in a building. Trying to bypass it would be like performing surgery with a sledgehammer. What do you need from me, Larry? Honestly, I need you to come back and fix this. I know Trevor terminated your contract, and I know he probably burned that bridge pretty thoroughly. But right now, you're the only person who can verify system integrity to our banking partners. Without that verification, we're looking at a complete shutdown of our credit facilities by Monday. I looked out my kitchen window. Scout was lying in the backyard watching a squirrel that was probably planning to raid our bird feeder. Simple problems, simple solutions. I'll need a new contract, I said finally. Direct relationship with the company, no vendor shell agreements. Clear scope of work, proper documentation in all systems. And I want Trevor's termination memo officially retracted. Done. Anything else? I want a written acknowledgement from Trevor that he ordered the deletion of critical infrastructure without proper authorization. And I want it before I restore anything. Carter, I'm not being vindictive, Larry. That memo he gave me yesterday is sitting in my files like a loaded gun. If this situation escalates, if the SEC decides to investigate compliance failures, if banking partners decide to sue for breach of fiduciary duty, that document shows gross negligence from a VP-level executive who ordered the destruction of regulatory infrastructure. You need it officially retracted and corrected before it becomes evidence in a federal investigation. Silence on the other end. Larry was doing the math, calculating just how bad this could get if the dominoes kept falling in the wrong direction. I'll handle Trevor. How soon can you restore system access? Give me a temporary credential and I can have the validation protocols reset within an hour. Full system verification will take another 3 hours after that. But Larry, this isn't just a matter of flipping a switch. I need to run a complete diagnostic to make sure nothing got corrupted during the lockdown, then rebuild the authentication chain step by step. The banking partners are going to want detailed documentation of every change. I'll have IT set up a temporary access token within 30 minutes. Check your email. Larry hung up and I fired up my laptop. While I waited for the access credentials, I opened my secure backup drive, the one place I hadn't deleted anything yesterday. Not because I was planning to hold the company hostage, but because any decent system architect keeps offline backups of critical documentation. You never know when you might need to rebuild something from scratch. The temporary access came through exactly 28 minutes later, along with a brief email from Larry. Do whatever you need to do. I'll handle the politics. I logged into Kavara's system for the first time since Friday afternoon. The compliance dashboard looked like a disaster movie. Red alerts cascading down the screen, error messages stacked on top of each other, system status indicators showing failures across multiple modules. But underneath all that noise, the core architecture was still intact. The system hadn't crashed, it had just locked itself down when it couldn't verify my credentials. I started with the authentication protocols, methodically resetting each credential chain and updating the verification tokens. Then I ran a full system diagnostic to check for any data corruption or cascading failures. Everything checked out clean. The system had done exactly what I'd designed it to do: protect itself when something went wrong. Next came the tedious part: rebuilding the compliance validation layer piece by piece, testing each component, documenting every change for the banking partner's review. It was like reassembling a watch while 3 people looked over your shoulder asking if it was fixed yet. By 4 p.m., I had the compliance engine running normally again. All the red alerts disappeared. The banking partner's monitoring systems showed green across the board, and the automated reports started flowing normally. I sent a brief status update to Larry. Primary systems restored. Running final verification protocols now. His response came back within minutes. Banking partners notified. Emergency board meeting moved to Tuesday. Trevor will not be attending any operational meetings pending internal review. That last line told me everything I needed to know about how Monday's conversations had gone. The official word came down the next day. Trevor Nash was pursuing other opportunities in strategic consulting. Corporate speak for fired, but we're letting him resign with dignity. I got a new contract with a 40% rate increase and official recognition as senior systems architect. No more shell companies, no more hiding in vendor agreements. My name would actually appear on the organization chart. The retraction memo arrived 2 days later, signed by Trevor himself. The termination directive dated Friday was issued without proper technical review and is hereby officially retracted. All work performed by Wells Technical Consulting is acknowledged as critical infrastructure requiring specialized oversight. The instruction to delete system components was unauthorized and violated established protocols. I printed it out and filed it next to the original termination memo. Sometimes the best insurance policy is documentation. A week later, Larry and I were back to our regular coffee meetings. Same little shop, same corner table, but something had changed. I wasn't invisible anymore. The entire company knew who I was and what I did. The compliance team had been restructured with proper backup protocols. 3 junior developers had been assigned to learn the system architecture under my supervision. Scout was waiting when I got home that afternoon, tail wagging like I'd been gone for months instead of hours. I scratched behind his ears and opened a beer. Just another day in Denver. Except now I had a story to tell about what happens when someone tries to delete the ghost in the machine without understanding what the ghost was holding up. The system worked exactly like I designed it to. No drama, no revenge, just simple cause and effect. Trevor learned that you can't manage what you don't understand. The banking partners learned that Kavara's compliance infrastructure was more robust than they'd realized. And me? I learned that sometimes being invisible isn't about hiding. It's about building something so essential that when you disappear, everyone notices.